Imagine life without a map. You get into a boat, the waves carry you in different directions, the wind changes every hour, and suddenly you're no longer where you dreamed of being. Most people live their lives exactly like this, drifting wherever circumstances, chance, and other people's expectations push them. But here's the paradox. We all want a better future, yet only a few take the time to stop and ask themselves, where am I really going? I've always said, life is not what we receive, but who we become in the process. And in this video, we'll go through 5 simple steps that will help you not just dream, but plan your dream life. Stay until the end, because I'll give you practical questions that can become your inner compass. Life is full of paradoxes. We live in a world where almost everyone has a phone in their pocket that can show a map of any city, point the way to any street, and tell you the shortest route to any place on Earth. And yet, most people, despite having access to literal maps, have never created a map for their own lives. A person may know how to get to another country, but has no idea where they are headed in their own destiny. And that is a tragedy. It's a silent trap that most fall into. We move every day, but are we moving in the right direction? Doesn't it resemble running in circles, without a plan, without meaning, without awareness? I've always loved reminding people, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by change. But change doesn't just show up on its own. It doesn't fall on our heads like a raindrop. Change has to be planned, and it has to be planned not only at the level of a day or a week, but at the level of dreams, vision, and who you want to become. Because if you don't define that vector, you'll always be carried away by the winds of other people's thoughts and expectations. You'll be like a ship without a rudder, moving but not controlling your own journey. There's something else I've noticed in thousands of people I've met all over the world. They're always waiting. They're waiting for the right time. They say, I'll start working on my dreams when things get easier, when I have more money, when I retire, when the kids grow up. But let me tell you the truth I once heard from my own mentor. The right time doesn't exist. There's only now, only this moment, this breath, this decision. Because life doesn't ask if you're ready. It just moves forward. And if you don't plan it, it will plan you. It will fill your days with trivia, with other people's worries, with endless busyness that consumes years but leaves no trace. So why is planning so important? Because planning is not about control, it's about clarity. It's not about erasing all obstacles from the road, but about knowing what's worth going through obstacles for. I know this from my own experience. When I was 25, I had debts, an empty wallet, and almost no hope. At that point, my life felt like a dead end. But when I met my mentor, he told me something simple. Jim, if you want something to change, you need a plan. And the plan must not start with what you want to have, but with who you want to become. That sentence turned my whole perspective upside down, because then I understood a goal is not just about the result, it's about the process. It's about the person you become in pursuit of that goal. Think about it, my friends, how strange our lives are. A person can plan a weekend trip down to the minute, when to leave the house, when to arrive at the station, when to board the train. But when I ask, what's your plan for the next 5 years? Who do you want to be in 10 years? Most look down and say, I don't know. We'll see. Is a 2-day trip really worth more of your attention than the journey of your entire life? Is the convenience of your suitcase more important than the baggage of your soul? That's the paradox, and that's why we must, right now, at this very moment, ask ourselves, do we have a map? Do we have 5 simple steps that will help us not just dream, but plan the life of our dreams? You know, I love the metaphor of a garden. Your life is the soil. If you plant nothing, weeds will grow. If you plant randomly, you'll get chaos. But if you plant deliberately, if you plant the fruits you want to see, if you tend to the soil, then years later, you'll have a harvest. And it's the same with dreams. They won't grow on their own. You must plant them through goals, water them with discipline, protect them from the weeds of distraction, and most importantly, have a vision of what garden you want to see. Because if you don't envision your garden, you'll end up working on someone else's. You'll live out a script that wasn't written by you. And now we've come to the heart of it. There are 5 simple steps that can be your starting point. 5 steps that will give you back control, clarity, and inspiration. This isn't abstract theory. These are practical steps that thousands of people have tested for themselves. And I too once started with them. The first two steps will teach you to create space and discipline for reflection. The next two will help you take an honest look at yourself and lock in the truth. And the last step will open the way forward toward the next goal. And today, we can walk this path together. But before we begin, I want you to remember one thing. You cannot change the past, but you can always rewrite your future. And it is rewritten not by dreams, but by a plan. So the first step to planning the life of your dreams is to find a quiet place. And it sounds so simple that most people undervalue it. They say, "Come on, Jim, how can you change your destiny just by sitting in silence?" But I want you to understand, silence is not the absence of sound. It's the space where you begin to hear yourself. In the noise of everyday life, endless calls, messages, televisions, and worries, you hear everything except your own voice. And that's the very voice that must guide you. That's the key to your dreams. Because if you don't hear yourself, you only hear others. And other people's voices will never build your life. I remember when I was young, I often ran off to a field near the farm where I grew up. I would just sit under a tree, and in that silence, suddenly a question would arise. "Jim, who do you want to become? Not what do you have now, not why are you so poor, but who can you become?" And then that simple pause, that silence without distractions, gave me more answers than hundreds of hours of busyness. Because in silence, clarity is born. Silence is like a mirror. It adds nothing of its own, but it shows you who you are. Maybe you felt this before. Think back to when you sat alone, without your phone, without the TV, maybe in a park or by a river, and suddenly ideas came to you. Not the ones you read somewhere, but the ones that seem to already live inside you. That's why the first step is so important, to find the space where your true thoughts are born. It could be a room, a corner of a park, even your car if that's the place where you feel at peace. The location doesn't matter. What matters is that in that moment, you are present for yourself. The second step is to do it regularly, because one-time silence is rest, but regular silence is practice. It's discipline. It's the root system that nourishes the entire tree of your life. Look around. We all know people who sometimes stop, sometimes write down their thoughts, sometimes plan, but sometimes never builds greatness. Sometimes doesn't shape character. Only consistency builds a system, and the system shapes destiny. I love to remind people, success is not an event, it's a process. It's not one giant leap, but hundreds of small, consistent steps. That's why the second step, setting aside time for reflection and planning consistently, is so critical. Because this is where you begin to train your mind, to train it like a muscle. You can't do one exercise and become strong. You must do it again and again. Consistency is what builds strength. When I was starting my journey, my mentor told me, "Jim, if you don't create a schedule for your life, life will create one for you, and trust me, you won't like it." Those words sounded like a warning. Because truly, if you don't decide when you will think, when you will write, when you will evaluate, circumstances will decide for you. You'll become a victim of chance. And instead of clarity, you'll get chaos. Consistency builds strength not only in thoughts, but in character. Because every time you sit in silence, even if you don't feel like it, even if you're bored, even if it seems pointless, you're training inner discipline. And discipline is the bridge between your dreams and your reality. It's what connects desire to achievement. And here's a little secret. You don't need to do this for 2 hours every day. Start with 10 minutes of silence. 10 minutes to stop and ask yourself, where am I going? What do I want? Do my actions today bring me closer to my vision? Then do it tomorrow and the next day. And then you'll begin to build not just a system, but the character of someone who is capable of dreaming and making those dreams real. Think of it this way, if you can find time for the news, if you can find time for social media, then you can find time for your own life. Isn't it a paradox that we easily waste hours watching other people's stories but claim we don't have 10 minutes for our own? That's absurd. But that's exactly why most remain spectators of others' achievements instead of becoming the authors of their own. My friends, these two steps are simple, but they're powerful. A quiet place and consistency. Silence gives clarity. Consistency gives strength. Together, they form the foundation on which you can build everything else. Without silence, no answers. Without consistency, no progress. You may have the best ideas in the world, but if they appear only randomly and disappear without a trace, they will remain just dreams. Only when you create space and discipline do dreams turn into plans, and plans into reality. And here's one thought I want to leave you with. When you find your quiet place and do it consistently, you are essentially building your own inner laboratory. A laboratory where you explore your life, your dreams, your possibilities. And in this laboratory, there are no extra eyes, no critics, no distractions. There's only you and your future story. And that is the most valuable time you can give yourself. The third step on the path to planning the life of your dreams is the ability to look at yourself honestly. And here I must be frank, this is one of the hardest steps. Honesty with yourself is often more painful than any criticism from others. Because you and I can spend years building illusions. We convince ourselves that we're working hard enough, that we're giving our maximum, that circumstances are to blame, that others are to blame. And it all sounds convincing until you stop and look truth in the eye. I remember when I was 25, I worked hard, but I was in debt, behind on my promises, and saw no perspective at all. And when I was asked, why aren't you achieving more? I answered, because of this company, because of the economy, because I'm unlucky. And then my mentor, Mr. Schaff, said words that cut like a knife. Jim, it's not the company's fault. It's not the economy's fault. It's you. This is all you're worth today, because this is who you have become. At first I felt offended, but later I realized that was my liberation. Because if the problem is in me, then the solution is also in me. And here's the key. Without ruthless honesty, you cannot move forward. You must sit down and look at your results, not at your dreams, not at your excuses, but at the facts. What's your financial situation? What's the state of your health? What are your relationships like? Are you growing or are you stuck? These are painful questions. But they are the only ones that give you strength, because illusions don't bring results. Illusions only prolong your stagnation. Imagine you're setting out on a trip. You want to arrive in New York. You know your destination. But if you don't determine where you are right now, no map will help you. You must know your starting point. And it's the same in life. A dream without an understanding of the present is just a fantasy. Only when you honestly see your current state do you gain the strength to see the next step. So the third step is this: be ruthlessly honest. This is not about self-criticism or self-punishment. It's about truth. You may have enormous potential, but if today you're falling behind, acknowledge it, because that acknowledgement is what gives you the chance to move forward. And now the fourth step, surprisingly simple, yet revolutionary. Write it down. And I want to emphasize, not just think about it, not just say it out loud, but actually write it down. Because thoughts are fleeting, but words on paper remain. I've repeated this many times in my seminars. Don't trust your memory. Memory is an unreliable archive. It forgets, distorts, changes details, but paper remembers everything. That's why I kept journals all my life. And when people ask me, Jim, why? I answered, because it's my life laboratory. In those pages are my dreams, my mistakes, my discoveries, my lessons. And most importantly, it allows me to see how far I've come. Let me tell you this, if you don't keep records, you're robbing yourself. Because at some point, life will give you an insight, an idea, an observation. It flashes in your mind and you say, oh, that's interesting, I'll remember it. But by morning, it's gone. And you know what? Insights don't come back on demand. They come once. And if you don't write them down, you lose them. My mentor once told me, Jim, buy a notebook, the best one you can afford, because if you record your thoughts in it, it becomes priceless. And he was right. I still look back at my old notes and see how small thoughts became big ideas, how plans became reality. Without those records, I wouldn't see that. But keeping records has another power. It disciplines your thinking. When you start writing, you force your blurry thoughts to take shape. You start thinking more clearly. You begin to see not just a chaotic flow, but structure. And life loves structure. Dreams love structure. Without structure, they remain dreams. Think of it like a garden. If you plant seeds and don't mark what you planted where, you'll end up with chaos. You won't know what's a flower and what's a weed. But if you keep records, you create a map of your garden, and then you can care for it properly. My friends, I want you to remember this today. Honest assessment and writing go together. They work as a pair. If you're honest with yourself but don't write things down, you'll fall into the trap of forgetting. If you write but aren't honest, you'll fill pages with illusions. But when you combine honesty with writing, you create a real foundation for change. You create a mirror that always shows you the truth. And most importantly, these two steps free you from the illusions of time. Because now you can look back and see who you were a year ago, 2 years ago. You see progress. And when you see progress, you believe in the future. Because the future is no longer a fantasy, but a logical continuation of your journey. The third and fourth steps are courage and discipline, the courage to tell the truth and the discipline to record it. Without them, you'll wander in the darkness of your own illusions. But with them, you'll have a lantern lighting the way forward. And now we've reached the fifth step, perhaps the most important one. Because all the previous steps are about preparing the soil. You find silence, you create consistency, you look at yourself honestly, you write down your thoughts. But what is all this for? For taking the final decisive step, looking forward and setting a new goal. My friends, the truth is simple. Life always pulls us backward, into yesterday. We get stuck in memories, in old hurts and lost opportunities. But if you want to live the life of your dreams, your strength is always in the future. And here's the key. The future doesn't just arrive. It has to be created. It has to be designed, just like an architect designs a building. Imagine you walk into an architect's office and ask, "What will this building look like?" And he replies, "I don't know, we'll see what happens." You'd run out of there immediately. And yet, that's exactly how most people approach their own lives. They live by the principle, "We'll see what happens." But I want to remind you of one truth. You don't get what you want, you get what you become. And it's the act of setting new goals that forces you to become someone else. It stretches you. It makes you bigger than you are today. Because to achieve more, you must become more. I remember at the start of my career, I only dreamed of getting out of debt. That was my first goal. But when I achieved it, my mentor said, "Good, Jim. Now set the next goal. Because without a new goal, you'll stop again." And he was right. A goal isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process. It's like a staircase. You climb one step, pause, and then see the next step ahead. And once again, you climb. That's how you grow. That's how you change. And here's the crucial point. Your next goal must be bigger than the last. If you set yourself a task that doesn't require you to change, it's not worth your time. A goal should push you beyond your comfort zone. It should scare you and excite you at the same time. If you don't feel a little tremor when you think about your goal, then it's not the right goal. I want you to imagine a future that inspires you. Picture yourself in 5 years. Where do you live? What are your relationships like? What is your health like? What is your financial situation? Who is around you? And most importantly, who have you become? Because if you don't have that vision, then where are you going? You'll just keep running in circles. You'll keep repeating yesterday, thinking you're moving forward. But a dream life requires specifics. It requires you to paint the picture. I like the metaphor of travel. If you want to travel, you choose a destination. You don't walk up and say, "One ticket, please, anywhere." No, you name the city, the country, the address. It's the same with life. Name the address of your dream. Because if you don't name it, you'll never arrive. And one more thing, new goals give you energy. Without goals, we fade. We become like a lamp that still burns, but the light is dim. I've seen this in many people. They achieved something and then stopped, and suddenly their lives lost their color. They no longer burn, they merely exist. Don't let that happen to you. Always set a new goal. Always have the next mountain to climb. And don't be afraid to set big goals. Don't be afraid to think big. I often say, if you have to think anyway, why not think big? A goal is like a magnet. It pulls you forward. It attracts people, resources, opportunities. And the stronger your magnet, the more it draws. The fifth step is the art of seeing the future. This is not fortune telling and it's not fantasy. It's responsibility. Because you sit down and say, here's who I want to become. Here's what I want to create. Here's where I'm going. And then your entire life starts to align with that direction. You start making choices that lead you toward that vision. You start saying no to what doesn't matter. You begin to distinguish between what's important and what's not, because now you have a compass. I want you to remember this. The fifth step is always about moving forward, even if you've already achieved a lot, even if you feel tired, because tiredness is not a sign to stop. It's a sign that it's time to renew your vision, because when a new goal appears in front of you, new energy appears inside you, and that energy changes everything. And here's the most fascinating part. This step never ends. Because every achieved goal becomes the beginning of a new one. It's an endless cycle of growth. And that's what makes life beautiful. Because the life of your dreams is not a destination, it's a journey. It's the constant pursuit of being better than yesterday. And that's what separates those who truly live from those who merely exist. So the fifth step is this: look forward and set a new goal. This is the step that makes you the author of your story. Because then you are no longer a passenger, you are the captain. You no longer live by chance, you live by design. And when you take that responsibility, you begin building a life worth living. My friends, I want to pause here. Listening is good, but real change comes when you start asking yourself questions. And I prepared 5 simple self-reflection questions for you. You don't need to pause the video now or run for a notebook. Just answer them in your mind on the go. Later you can come back and write them in your journal for deeper reflection. Remember, each question is rated from 1 to 10, where 1 means very poor, I don't do this at all, and 10 means I'm completely satisfied with this area of my life. This is not a test, it's a mirror. First question, how regularly do I find my quiet place? Do I give myself space for reflection, or is my life nothing but noise? Imagine a garden without soil. Everything you plant has nowhere to take root. That's what life without silence looks like. Be honest in your rating. Second question, how consistently do I practice regularity? Do I have the discipline that shapes my days? Without consistency, we are like a boat without oars, forward, backward, sideways. You move, but not where you wanted to go. Where are you right now on a scale from 1 to 10? Third question, how honestly do I evaluate my present? Do I see the truth, or do I hide behind illusions? The hardest thing is to look in the mirror and see not what you want, but what is. Yet that's where change begins. How do you rate your courage in this? Fourth question, do I keep records of my thoughts, ideas, results? If not, your ideas vanish like raindrops on hot asphalt. They touch you, and within a minute they're gone. Paper remembers, the brain does not. Rate how disciplined you are in this. Fifth question, do I have a clear, fresh goal? Not yesterday's, not one you've already achieved, but a new one that pulls you forward. Because without a goal, life loses its color. And if you don't have your own goal, you become part of someone else's. Look at your dream. How alive is it within you today? My friends, these 5 questions are simple, but they carry great power. They're like small lanterns that illuminate the dark corners of your life. And if you give yourself honest answers, you'll already take a huge step forward. I encourage you, after this video, come back to these questions. Sit in your quiet place, open your notebook, and answer them in writing. You'll be surprised at the clarity it brings, because this is where real transformation begins, not in words, but in actions. And one more thing, if this video has been helpful for you, subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and leave a comment, especially about which of the 5 questions was the hardest for you. I've always said, learning is not just about receiving, but also about sharing. Your experience might inspire someone else to change. My friends, the life of your dreams doesn't come by chance. It doesn't fall into your hands like a winning lottery ticket. It is born from silence, discipline, honesty, writing, and new goals. The 5 simple steps we've taken together are not just a method. They are a way of living consciously, of not leaving your destiny to chance. Remember, you don't get what you want. You get what you become. And if you are ready to become a greater person, life will respond with greater rewards. So don't postpone it. Start today. Sit in your quiet place, take your notebook, and give yourself the chance to write a new chapter of your story. I've always said, don't just dream of an easy life, dream of a life with meaning. And if you follow this path, you won't just plan the life of your dreams, you will create it.